program and leave feedback for the speaker. It would be very much appreciated. And then, please welcome Christian Panton.
Thank you. So this is sort of an iteration of a talk I've been giving for a few years. So if you've seen some of the parts and some of the jokes, please still laugh because they're still funny. But I added a lot of content because license plate readers in Denmark have been fairly growing over the past few years here in Denmark, where it started out in sort of only policing. It's becoming more prevalent across the board. And I want to give an introduction to what is going on with license plate readers in Denmark and what's going on with sort of the entities that are starting to use them. But first, like, why did I get into this? So I'm a guy who takes pictures of things that sits in poles in the sort of traffic space. I really am curious about what a thing like this was, for instance. So you can look it up, it's a FLIR, forward-looking infrared-based sensor that can be used to detect cars, but also people. These are being put up in cities because it's cheaper than digging down spools to detect cars inside the concrete, and it's easier to reconfigure if you have roadworks, for instance. So this is a very common technology, but it actually also have a feed out so you can watch it in real time. So those are like a thing that I'm interested in, of course. Other boxes that are sitting in light poles and stuff like that. First of all, there's like a camera here, but that's pretty standard now. But there's also like things that detect Wi-Fi. There's things that detect Bluetooth and other things. Those things are always interesting to see. And therefore, I take pictures of them, try to identify them, and figure out the purpose and who sets them up. To figure out like what do all these boxes in our sort of outdoor environment actually do. More boxes here. This one fairly recently just came up. I haven't looked up what it is, but that was just something sitting almost outside of my house. The other thing over there is a blip track. They do Bluetooth-based commute distance, and also now they do some corona policing because they try to detect how many people are in an area. So generally, like, I look up all this stuff. So a good thing about that is that I take digital photographs of everything. So I know exactly when I got interested in license plate readers, or ALPR, automatic license plate readers. And that is from metadata of the picture. So that was back in 2016. This is the first picture I've taken. It's on a street that is very... I live in Albertslund, and this is in Glostrup. This is the main road towards Copenhagen, if you don't go by highway. And it was suddenly sitting there in the middle of the road. And I go by, you can see that it's a little bit blurry, so it's kind of like, what is going on here? I go by bike and take a picture. And then, of course, I take sorry. That was the picture. I'm one slide ahead, sorry about that. And take a few more pictures of this, and this is generally what I do, like trying to figure out what is this thing, right? And I don't even know why I took a picture of the manufacturer of the pole. I thought that would be nice, but now I know a lot about like the impact that a pole can resist before it's breaking and the failure characteristics of it. So sometimes you get off on the wrong foot there, but then you can sometimes take a really good, like, clear picture of what's going on in the business end of the pole, and then you can start to identify this. So I didn't waste time. 1 minute after, I put a picture on Twitter of all of this. And I think less than an hour later, I figured out what it was. So it was this Genetec Sharp, it's called. It's like a first generation license plate reader. And as soon as I did this, other pictures emerged through Signal, through Messenger, through various means of communication. People starting sending me pictures of these license plate readers around the country, because they started noticing the same thing that I noticed, that there was a new box in town. There's a new thing that sat on the overpass somewhere. And they were, like, these boxes are fairly big. I even brought one here, so you can see that they're kind of big, right? So they're easy to spot, and they are very characteristics because they have these dual camera system, and then they have the LEDs in the middle. So it was a very easy thing to say, like, you know, look at it at the business side here, and then if you see something like this, please DM me, essentially. And this was fairly, like rapidly, I started getting pictures. And some of the pictures included yellow labels. So RP means Rigspolitiet, National Police, ALPR, license plate reader, SCAPE, that is a box or something else. And then it says that this is a type 3 installation. So it's interesting to see, okay, they have different types of installations. And they have some component numbers on it as well. But the nice thing as well is that you get this 06 Fasanvej. That looks a little weird. It's a name of a place, but it indicates that it's like a site ID. So this is a way you can kind of estimate the upper bound of how many sites there are. Like get the highest number. There was like a famous German, there's a famous German tank serial number example, if you ever look that up, where the Allies tried to figure out how many German tanks were being produced by looking at serial numbers of tanks that got destroyed. And this is pretty much the same thing. Since they have like site IDs, you can kind of like, okay, we have the upper limit of how many sites we know that are in production right now, essentially. I got a few of these labels, and I specifically asked for these labels to try to understand like how many are there, where should we move from here. One thing that is interesting is also these suddenly become like fixtures in the environment. So there was an election shortly after, and I wanted to put like my own billboard on there. I looked up a lot on the law on what you can put on election posters. And I could basically, if I made an election poster and put my name on it, I could make it like something saying like, stop mass surveillance or something like that, and put it on there, and that would be a valid thing. But then I looked up the rules, and you're not allowed to put it in the middle of the road because it's too speed, you drive too fast there, but politicians were allowed. Okay, so another approach was like, I kind of knew that this was the police's stuff. I needed to know more about it. So I sent out a freedom of information request to the municipality where this was placed, trying to fly a little bit under the radar, not going directly to the police, because otherwise they'll just block me up front, trying to see if I can hit somebody who's clueless about this, who doesn't know that this is national security or perceived to be national security in some sense. And what they said is that they could talk to Rigspolitiet, and I was not allowed to know what it was. So they were kind of giving it away that it was belonging to Rigspolitiet, but I can kind of like put two and two together then, right? And then I said, okay, please give me the complete correspondence journal on the file. Don't give me all the files, but just like give me the index of your file on this case. And then they kind of noted this, there was a meeting in City Hall where this was marked on this file. And then I looked up the minutes from the meeting, and that was public. Like the minutes were public on the website. It was just scanned, so I couldn't go through it. Like I couldn't find it when I was Googling it. But basically it says that the police, without prior authorization, put up a license plate reader in the middle of their street. There's laws that allow the police, it's called the guest principle, it allows the police to put stuff up like this, but they didn't apply for one thing. And paperwork is very important. They didn't apply for to dig up the road license. So they had to do that afterwards, after the fact. Because I had this, I could then go back to the municipality and say, please give me all the files. I know this is ALPR now. It's public. There's no way to hide it now. And then the police sent, I got the letter which the police sent to the municipality, said, please don't let Christian know about the fact that this is ALPR. And I got a letter of the. So I think that is fairly funny. So I played around with more shenanigans when it came to FOIA requests, and sometimes it's like you get stuff like this back, right, where it's just like blacked out. But then I thought, okay, it's two municipality entities communicating together. I'm just gonna ask the other end, and then I got the full mail. So that is also funny. Then sometimes I go by, try something completely different so they don't think I'm gonna attack them from, right? So one of them is go by invoices. Like, I just want to see your invoices. And they are so in their head, like focused on, Christian must not know the price of this stuff, that they forgot to black out what was actually sold to them. So if you zoom in, it actually tells you like all the things they did, like the places they put up license plate readers and stuff like that. that was kind of the material thing that I wanted, but I kind of made a magic trick by saying invoices, and I want to know like how much does this cost, and then they say you cannot know what this costs because it's secret, but they forgot to black out what I was actually going for. So by doing these methods and also having a lot of people helping me out, I want to thank all you anonymous guys out there who have contributed photos and also named persons, which I will not name because I don't know if I'm allowed to. But thank you for helping me finding all these. So this was the map about 2 years ago. It was really, really nice to see how quickly this came about. It took about a month or two, and we have mapped out all the scanners that were suddenly there. That was extremely nice. Then the police showed to Folketinget and others that this was a very good thing, they thought. So let's put up some more. And actually, the Danish parliament was putting pressure on the police to put up more scanners. And now since the technology evolved a little bit, they now put up a second generation scanner. They're a little smaller. They're about half the size of about half the size of this bugger, right? So if you imagine the lens size here, and you see up here, you kind of see that they kind of just pulled off all this extra IR in the middle. That's because the sensitivity of the cameras got much better, and they don't need that much illumination anymore. Since this is now cut in a much smaller size, they can now mount them in places where it's almost impossible to see. So now they get mounted on the bridges, for instance. This is a good example. This is on the highway. Sorry, this is on the highway. It's under the bridge, and it's not even so there's like a pole sticking up. The old system had the sort of disadvantage that it was kind of mounted on the side of overpasses, and then people would like put sticks down and move the cameras not to point at the road anymore or destroy them. But now, since they are under the deck, essentially, it's really, really hard to get to. So therefore, they are kind of protected from the environment that way, but also vandalism. So how do I go about finding these new things? Because they're not they're not easy to spot anymore. They are kind of hidden away from daily life because they're sitting in their quiet life under highway underpasses. So there are kind of few tricks to look up stuff like this and shenanigans like this. So the first one would be FOIA, the permits for digging up the road. And I did that a lot. So I asked different municipalities, can I please get the permit that you have for setting up cameras from this specific company that was doing this? And they were blacking out all the prices, but they didn't black out the plan for where it was. So this is actually the one from Glostrup, the first camera. And you can kind of see on the plot here that they even draw out where the power line goes. So it is very nice. You can kind of see where they dug up the road essentially to place it, and they even fairly accurately place the direction and orientation of the cameras. So it was even with complete degrees and how they should be mounted towards the road. So that's a really good evidence to say that there's a camera here. But another thing that is really nice about this is that because this is now we're entering the public domain, right? You're digging up the road, you need to coordinate with other people, stuff like that. So there's a register called Ledningsejerregister, or the ones that own cables in the ground register. Grave info, digging info it's called. So it's a place where you can look up before you dig a hole in the ground whether there's a cable. And all these things were actually put in there because they were doing, they were first screening whether there was cables, and that puts in an entry, and then they're doing the actual digging that puts in another entry. So you could kind of figure out here, and you can see that this company is called ITS Technique. That's the company that won the contract for setting up these license plate readers. And then suddenly you have some numbers, you can start FOIAing that, getting information. Another thing is when you need to do roadworks to set up cameras, you also need to block the street. And I learned a lot about, this is also one of these, you're going to another rabbit hole, right? The rules of how to mark a street properly. It's a thick book, and it has all these nice diagrams. But this diagram is actually from the Glostrup case as well, where it kind of marks the type of block that you have to have on the road with the signaling on it, and what kind of truck it can take and withstand, basically. So like if you're on a street with a specific speed limit, it needs to be, it needs to have a certain stopping power, the thing that you put there. So if you come here from the Copenhagen side over the bridge, you try to notice the things they have on the bridge for stopping cars if they were swerving into the lane. It's like big trucks with large tanks of water on it to stop a large truck from hitting roadside workers, essentially. But you have to submit plans like this, because otherwise it's dangerous to work on the road. But you can get a freedom of information request out on this. And they kind of don't think about it, but it contains a lot of information, like who's the one you're doing the work for instance. So it kind of reveals things on the side anyways. And then if it's on a public sort of state road, it's actually, you have to report it to Vejdirektoratet, which is the national authority for the roads. It's kind of like the Danish Department of Transportation. And this is like just local like road closings and stuff like that in the area here. And you can even see them here, like when they are blocking the road in order to set up this equipment. Another extremely valuable source is Mapley. I don't know if I couldn't pronounce it correctly. People in the tent here are helping me quite a lot on that. So it's basically like Street View but updated. So it's great, and it's there's so much more tracks on it, so much more fidelity on it, because it's brought by volunteers, I think, mostly. I'm just so happy that I can look up places where I want to investigate more on whether there's a license plate reader or not, without having to start my car. Like I really enjoy that. Also because I don't want to drive to Jutland for figuring out whether there's a license plate reader X or Y, like whether one of these blips on the roadworks map was actually a license plate reader that came up. So from this, it's kind of like the first rollout was like this, fairly concentrated in sort of Copenhagen, maybe a little bit on the border crossings, maybe a little bit on like central points. This was 2017-ish state, and then just a few years later, this is the situation right now where we have license plate readers, and it's kind of just like exploded. So it's still like on the long stretches of road within Denmark. It's not, it's not every 10 kilometers, but probably like every 50 or 100 kilometers you'll meet it if you go by the major roads. But then in border regions, and especially around Copenhagen, it's pretty crazy how much got up there. And it's just been exploding over the past few years. Especially like Copenhagen is completely surrounded now. Like all minor roads as well are starting to get these license plate readers. All right. So that was the police view, like the police use of license plate readers. And now I'm just gonna move into some other entities that have started doing license plate readers as well. So if do you have any questions right now just to that part, or should we take them afterwards? Okay. Anything about the police's use of it? All right. Otherwise, give me a shout afterwards. So, of course, there's the ANPG Black Edition. I can just tell you that it's the National Police Security Service that is setting them up, and they're being put up near places that they protect. So it's usually it's being put up. If you remember, there was a case in Ringsted where there was a sort of immediate threat to the life of, I think it was some Iranian group, something like that. I'm sorry about the details here, but that led to a complete police chase across Zealand, closing down all the bridges and stuff like that. Guess what? There was one of these license plate readers just sitting outside there. It's probably one of the first ones that gave a hit that this car was stolen. There was a Swedish car stolen, or market stolen, the police registers. This was sitting right outside the house. This one is near Karolinerskolen in northern Copenhagen, Østerbro. They are near. They are located near places where PT, the Danish police intelligence service are protecting people or protecting property. And these are even more secret, of course, than the ones that the police have. You can basically not get any information about them. But one thing that is really nice, and I think it's probably extremely stupid of them, but they kind of made them black rather than white. So it's very easy to see whether this is something that is meant, like who owns them. So it's like black hat, white hat kind of thing, almost. Then other players are starting to move into this game, right? And this was actually just sent to me while I was in the parking lot, parking up my car here for BornHack, that a newspaper article in a newspaper in Aarhus was saying, like, there's a mystery camera and nobody know who owns it. And it's pretty ironic given GDPR that you're required to tell that you're doing surveillance, right? That nobody knows who owns the camera. But somehow the data protection in Denmark discounts information about who actually operates the CCTV. I was in Norway, for instance, and it's fairly common that all CCTV camera signs also have like who's the responsible of the operation under it. But apparently it's too hard in Denmark. Anyways, so it's interesting to see that it's also kind of hitting like other people are noticing these cameras, right? And this specific camera, and it's nice that they buy different brands so you know what they like the different purpose of them. So this one is called an PSICore camera. It's for controlling the environmental zones in Copenhagen, Odense, Aarhus, and Aalborg. So in these cities, there is a environmental zone where you're not allowed to drive your truck into with a diesel, without a diesel particle, something filter on you, and you cannot. If you go in there anyways, this is the way you get fined then. So they kind of had to capture the license plate so everybody check whether you are a truck or if you are like a personal vehicle. And then they had to get rid of the data for personal vehicles. And then they have to check the trucks afterwards to check whether you actually have paid your dues or if you have submitted to these extra filters on your truck. So of course it's great that we don't have large trucks with like polluting diesel particles in the city. But whether this is the correct approach, I'm not entirely sure. Also because it's not necessarily everywhere these cameras will be. Anyways, I actually saw one of these cameras also going over the bridge, and that's something that I'm gonna be interested in coming. Like when I go back again, see if I can spot it on the other way. But it seems that this camera is more of a consumer friendly, or like not necessarily police friendly, but towards more like normal enterprises that you can buy a license plate reader. Since this is operated by the Danish Sund & Bælt, which is a public company owned by the state, they are actually also under Offentlighedsloven, which is the Public Records Act in Denmark, which means that I asked for a list of all the sites that they put up. So now I actually got a very nice list from them. They weren't even pushing back on that, so that was nice. But it shows that if you're a little bit familiar with some of the geographies of Aarhus, Copenhagen, Aarhus, and Odense, it's not necessarily like omnibus surveillance right now. But who knows, it might change going down the line, that they might put up more once they realize this will not work in the end. Once they figure out that people will just drive another way into the city. A funny thing about this is all these places are places where the police also have a camera. So now they're kind of, you typically see, like for instance, near Damhussøen in Copenhagen, which is like a recognizable spot. You see two license plate readers just next to each other, operated by two different entities. And there was talks that the police was the one that was going to be used to this first. So I think the police set up the cameras first to bid for this, so they could collect more data up front. But then it was kind of, I think somebody saw that the wins, that it was probably better to put this in a separate company to avoid misuse of data. Another camera you might see is this one called Siemens PSICore. It's also fairly well used in Denmark. If you came on highway here, it's on this area of Fyn and on the Trekantsområdet, it's called in Jutland. It's just the immediate area from here in Jutland where the roads are covered with these cameras. And they'll be used primarily for travel time measurements. So it's an alternative to Bluetooth tracking and other tracking in order to see what are the travel times in the area. But they're using these Siemens PSICore cameras for this purpose. Also know that the municipality of Copenhagen uses these for some, I think, some sort of measurements. Yeah. Then there's one camera that I found more that was also used by Vejdirektoratet, which is like the Danish DOT, which is called the CA Traffic Black Cat. And they could just say that it was used for experimental stuff. It didn't seem to be very bad experimental stuff, but it was more like, could they figure out if people were driving too many hours in their lorry without stopping or stuff like that. But it's still like, it's a slippery slope, right? Apart from that, there's tons of operators now in the private domain that are starting to use license plate readers across the board. It's being used by parking, a lot by parking entities, and a lot by parking enforcement. Especially like cities are using it for parking enforcement, and also if you enter and exit like parking garages, it's being used at a very high rate now. And I think it is being started to be used for payments as well. So when you cross the bridge, you can pay by plate instead. They're capturing the license plate anyways, even though you don't pay by plate. But they, and I guess that's because they want some security if you're defrauding them by paying with a stolen card or something like that. So that is kind of the domain of where we are right now. And now I'm gonna focus a little bit on this bastard down there. So I've had alerts on eBay for quite a while for these cameras because I wanted to play with them. I think that my main goal the first time I saw this was I kind of wanted to enact what a group of artists did once in the UK, where they made a film based on CCTV camera. So they were kind of acting in front of CCTV cameras, and then they asked for the data under data protection law, got a copy of the data, and then they could use that for an artistic purpose. And I've kind of been drawn for having a selfie with one of these cameras. I kind of wanted to see like, what do I look like to a license plate reader? So I thought, okay, the best way would be to see when these go discounted on eBay. But I'm a bit cheap sometimes, so I actually just put up a link to MobilePay on my Twitter feed, and I went to make some food or something like that, and in a few hours I had enough money to buy this. So actually, thank you for everybody who owns this now. You can get a officially signed certificate of ownership, where you can get like your quarter or tenth or whatever of the camera if you want to. But right now it's in safe possession with me. But I think it's more of a community purchase because you all participated to this. So the first thing was like, I was waiting for this to go from some parking lot, defunct parking lot in the US, in Utah, to come to Copenhagen, or to Albertslund, where I live. And the first thing that was kind of trying to figure out was, I need to power this bastard somehow, and I don't know how to power it, and there's no manual. You can buy the very official cable from them, but they don't document anything about specs. So I was really like looking at manuals, trying to enlarge this stuff, trying to figure out if I can find like a catalog of connectors so I can buy that prior to getting the camera. But I was, there's not enough resolution on it, and some of the pictures that I got were kind of countering each other with which connector to buy. So I needed to get the damn thing for it. But luckily I got it, and here's a man, and he's very happy that he got a ALPR camera in the mail. I was like ecstatic the day that it came in the mail. I guess you could also just have gone here with a mask and just stolen one from the street, but I thought that this was a nice thing actually to buy it. So I'm actually happy to legally have this camera in my possession. But I could find now we could take some high resolution pictures, and again it's like Twitter is awesome, and people with specialty in cables and connectors said you need this specific plug, and I bought this specific plug, and it came the day after, and it fitted. So that was wonderful. One problem though, I don't know what was what here. Like there's no manual on which of the many pins here do what. So, and I didn't just want to go by random, and I knew that some of this was Ethernet, some of this was a video signal, and some of this was power. But I did not know which was which, and I didn't want to mess around with it too much. So I had to dissect it. So this was like an operating table. I put the kids to bed, and I was laughing manically while I tried to open the damn thing. First I had to void the warranty. Sorry about that. I was not expecting to enjoy that afterwards. And the first thing that came to light was a very happy sight. It runs Windows XP embedded. I knew I'd struck gold at this point, It's what more can I ask for? A Windows XP computer that haven't been patched for 10 years, running inside of an enclosure that is incredibly hard to get to. That is almost a success for if you ever have to do anything malicious with these cameras, right? So I gutted it completely. And this is sort of an overview of the internals of such a camera. And one thing that springs to mind is that it's very kind of put together by crap, right? It's zip tied together and stuff like that. A lot of things look like this on the inside, but this sort of have like it's like hot glue on some connectors that were kind of forced into place. This is really clearly something that is like second or third generation prototype style that they put into production. Specifically, some of the stuff going down in the south part of this picture with the number label on it, they were really forced in there with connectors, and it kind of looked like you had some sort of lab setup that you're just trying to miniaturize a little bit and put on the bench, and then make a lot of money on that lab setup, and then go for the new generation as you sold before, when you start pushing them to the mass market. But I can maybe give you a little bit of a tour to what's going on here, if you're interested. So and sorry about using the term business and all the time, but it's kind of where all the magic happens, right? On the front here, you have LED panels. You have what's called a context camera. It's just a standard HGA camera. And then there's a high frame rate, extremely light sensitive ALPR camera. And it's just a basic standard. It's called a Basler. It's something you use for scientific stuff. It's stuff you use it in if you ever have like assembly line, or if you have some production facility where you need to do like quality control with images or stuff like that. It's built for taking pictures day out and day out, and it feeds via FireWire into a capture port. So you see the two PCBs that are yellow on top. They feed into a capture card, basically. So these digitize the video. So there's a video input, so you can have another camera on it sitting on this connector. And then you have the context camera puts in this video, and then you have a FireWire card for the digital video stream from the from the sort of high resolution camera. And then there is some onboard digital signal processing, because the CPU is not that powerful, so they do a lot of DSP on the board itself before they put it off to the main CPU. So I'm not sure, maybe I will go to a place where we can see the main CPU board. It's the big green thing, but if you turn it around on the back side, it's much more interesting. It's basically an industrial PC. So it's like an completely standard industrial PC. It has some connectors that are like Ethernet and USB and power and sound and stuff like that. So with this, I could kind of, because the industrial PC, it's a very common, I think it's called like PC 106 or something like that, which is a very standard industrial PC form factor and board. You could kind of reverse engineer all connections to that. And then you could kind of, from there, reverse engineer connections to the plug, figuring out like which plug is the TX, RX on the Ethernet, which ones are power, where's ground, where's video signals and stuff like that. So that got mapped out, and then there was a little bit of shenanigans. So there's like 2 different ways you can power it, and it's something to do with some failover with batteries. But a lot of people were very nice to explain what was going on Twitter with me. And I was kind of probing while taking pictures and got helped out. And the other thing is I had to dig in my stuff, like who uses these huge cards anymore, right? Who uses what's called compact flash cards anymore? So I had to find a compact flash reader in my junk bin somewhere. It took me that was probably what took me the longest. I think it took 2 days to find it. But anyways, I found that, and then I could dump the SD card. I have the SD card as a gzip file, so if you want to play around with the file system at some point, you can do that. But you can also just go to the website and download a software update, and it's pretty much the same. So all the stuff that is interesting is in a zip file on the website. So just have to look at the right place. Anyways, I could power this up, and then I could do the first selfie, and that was kind of like, yay! Yeah. So that was awesome. And you see the pink light from the IR LEDs there in the front. And this is the picture. So this is from the context camera, and this is from the ALPR camera, the one with where I'm really lit up in the face. Yeah. I brought it here with me, so if you want to play around with it, I thought of 2 things that you can do to attack the thing. You can attack it on the network side, and you could attack it on the optics side. I think that attacking it on the optics side is the nicest thing. And I'm going to leave it here at the camp, and I hope that somebody's going to play around with it and try to see if you can try to fuss it. I don't remember the password for it anymore. I don't remember anything for it, so it's standard passwords that are in manuals around on the internet. So you can probably hook up to it and figure out how to get to it. But it's also a Windows XP machine, so I'm sure that you can exploit it through RDP. It runs RDP, for instance, so that should be fairly simple to do. But play around with it if you want to. I consider this as a community thing. It's not mine. It's like yours and ours. So I'm not going to hold on to it forever. So if you have some interesting projects where you want to play with it, this is now in all our hands. One thing that I was playing with was trying to defeat on the optics side. So I have like a few ideas that I haven't gotten around to materialize in my head yet. But there was like 2 things that I thought of. One was blinding it, and one was trying to obfuscate your car so it couldn't figure out the license plate. Obfuscating your car so it cannot figure out the license plate might make your car look really ugly, and you might get into conflict with some of the legislation around license plates, which says that you cannot put something on your car that looks like a license plate. But you can probably put some banners or other stuff on there that will confuse the algorithms. And I would invite everybody to try to do that, of course. Sadly, I didn't have time to do it, to set up a test setup, because otherwise that would be like a fun thing to do. Maybe next year, or if somebody wants to do it. The other thing was blinding it, and I thought that that was probably the best tactic, trying to, shine strong IR light from like around your license plate, not on your license plate, but just like having like a frame around your license plate with IR light that is not like human visible, but were really, really strong, like beefy Chinese LED, 10 watt LEDs, right? So I was playing a bit around with it, and I was filming it, and I don't know if you can see that it kind of blacks out on one side here, and I don't show the video here, but it has like a rolling shutter effect, and I was trying to look out what's going on there. There's like some sort of frequency to this light, so that was interesting to me, at least, and kind of a downturn from my side, because that means that it's kind of bursting light at specific times. And then the other thing is that if you look at the camera, and this is the camera, if you want to look that up, it's called the SCA A1300G32GM. That's the Basler camera. But it has a spectral response that is not very good in the RR domain. That means that it's actually better for daylight like now. So if you're trying to avoid the camera by blinding it during the day, it's almost impossible. So you really have to go blinding it at night. That's the only possibility you have. Otherwise, the sun is just too strong, cannot really blind the camera from there. So one thing that I rigged up trying to figure out this signal was just rigging up like a small meter buck thing that I tried to like read out data, like PHK did some articles on how you read out data from your meter, and I wanted to do the same. And I had this lying around, so it was rigged up to detect IR light. It's just like IR serial, but I just hooked up one of the lines to my scope, And there you can kind of see the period of the burst. So even though it's negative, it's just because it's conducting. So it's conducting when the light is hitting the sensor. That's why it's jumping down. And you can see the time period is 820 microseconds. So that is the amount of time that it actually illuminates the target. And the rest of the time is dark. And you can kind of see here the spikes that they go. It's very long between. But the nice thing about this is that it's synchronized, and I could check this out by doing like multi-channel on it itself. It's synchronized to the frame rate of the camera. So it's like every time that every time the shutter goes to take a picture, it like bursts out an RR signal. So you can actually detect ALPR cameras that have this style of sensors just by the signature. If you have something that have like a rapid pulse of IR, that is because it's synchronized to the frame rate of the camera. So every time you want to take a picture, it's kind of like light bulb, right? And there's some fairly beefy caps in there. So if you open it up, be careful, because they store a lot of power, and they run the LEDs in an extreme overpower mode to make these bursts. But because they only do it so shortly, the lifetime is not hampered by the camera, because they can cool it during this whole cold cycle, essentially. Yeah. Yeah.
We still have 10 minutes or almost quarter of an hour for questions, so please feel free to ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you send the emails to your local government organization to get information, how technical are you, and how much legal stuff you put in the emails?
It's not very technical. You just ask for things, the way you would do it normally, with normal wording. Yeah.
So just please give me all the information about.
Yeah, sometimes you can put some keywords in there that will trigger things, but generally I just try to use my own language when doing this stuff, because if you go too technical, they might not understand it. You just try to imagine who's on the other side. Yeah.
So it seems that besides you doing this kind of public investigation, there's another YouTuber like the anarcho-capitalist Lars Andersen. He also likes to criticize these. He does it in a slightly different way. It seems that your effort is aimed towards documenting what's going on, and his is more towards how to destroy them.
Mm.
I wonder if there's what's a good, besides documenting what's even going on, is there any effort towards actually using this information towards kind of addressing the issues of mass surveillance?
So I think that my approach is about curiosity and understanding things. I don't want to criticize things that I don't understand. I really need to understand what I'm against. This is what's driving me all the time. I'm curious, and I want to understand why things are working the way they are. And by that, it will enlighten you to have a political debate on it. There might be different approaches in the political or anarchist space on how to handle this. I am probably more of a traditionalist in terms of democratic discourse. I wouldn't destroy a camera, right? Personally. But I see it as some sort of sense that people are starting to develop on these issues, that by informing people about this, they can draw their own sort of reasoning about it and also have an enlightened debate. Otherwise, I think that it's too easy to dismiss an argument if you're acting without information, essentially. Like if you're acting without any concrete information about the threat, then you'll be sawn in part by the ones who have the information. So I think it's more of an equalizer to ensure that we're all aware of what's going on a technical level as well, and how that can be defeated, and how it works, and how things are interconnected. And then we can start a debate from there. And we can also, of course, do other things, but it's not necessarily my domain to do that.